In this video, we're building a benchwork which is designed to allow for relocation.
Hello and welcome to a video tutorial. I see so many people tearing down, dismantling their layouts because they're moving. And well, sometimes it can be a good idea because it might be your first layout and you learn a lot on your first build, and then you don't want to take those mistakes with you to the next location and continue on them there, but rather start fresh. Another good reason is that you might have a lot more space or less space in the new place, and then the old framework will not fit. But besides from that, I see a lot of people dismantling their layouts really for no reason. They're building a new layout in a new place, spending a lot of time with this, the benchwork. And well, if you like the benchwork, then it's a good idea, but otherwise not. There are a few things you can do in the planning phase to plan for a movable layout. And then we're not talking modular or portable in any way, but it's actually possible to move from the current location to wherever you will relocate, if you relocate, or if you're selling the layout, or whatever the reason is. And we're going to have a look at this whilst we're completing the framework up to the point where you see now I've added the sub-roadbed here, so we're ready to lay tracks. But let's start from the beginning, see what we need to think about planning the benchwork to get it so you can move it to wherever you go when you relocate.
Now, before we start the actual design work, it's some things you need to check before. And that is the room door size. Well, it has to be possible to get the layout out the door in the room. So that will be a maximum dimension, of course. And then outside the room there is probably a hallway, and that one has a length. So you need to consider that you will be able to carry the layout through the hallway without touching any walls. Or if that's not possible, then you need to take the layout out through a window. And then what is the window size? That will set the maximum size for the layout, or the each part of the layout. Then, of course, you need to transport the layout. And in Europe, the maximum loading length, to be able to drive the truck using a standard license, a B license, is 3.8 meters. So you should avoid having layout parts which is longer than 3.8 meters. So with these measurements in mind, you can start the design work. I'm using ANRail in this example. I draw my track plan in ANRail, but they all have a feature where you can draw lines. And I draw two lines here, which represents the division lines of the layout, as well as a third line to the left here, which represents the end of the benchwork. As you see here now, this division line crosses over a few turnouts, which is not a good thing because you don't typically want to saw apart turnouts. Then the turnouts, the track work needs to be a bit adapted, and then you load the track plan into the CAD system here, where you design the framework, and then you can adapt the exact position of each beam, so they match the dimension you have aimed for, plus not interfering with the track work. So after this stage, we're ready to start building the benchwork, which I've already done in the previous video. In this video, we will adapt it to make it movable. And you see here, I have cut the framework apart, or actually it's assembled in two parts. And each of these parts are terminated with a 16 millimeter plywood. So I join these together and fix them temporarily using screw clamps. I will use guide pins to make sure that they get into this position every time it's assembled. And for these I ordered, these are from Amazon. It's a bit of a gamble when you order from Amazon these type of parts, but these were pretty good, so good enough for me. If you want precision made, well then DCC Concept in UK has 4 modular layouts and they're really nice. You also need one of these. It's a drill guide which helps you to drill a 90-degree into the material, which is absolutely necessary when assembling guide pins like this. So I fix this drill guide, drill template using screw clamps, and then I drill the holes. I settled for 2 pins in each of the divisions of my layout. So in total I just needed 4 pins. And then I just put a drop of glue there and knock them into the position using a hammer like this. So then we're ready to assemble the 2 parts together. And I fixed them using a M8 bolt, which is bolted through the plywood in 6 positions. So that will keep everything in place while building and operating the layout. And once assembled, it looked like this. I also draw a red line to indicate that this is the place where the layout should be divided. And with the entire framework ready, it looked like this. So you can see the first division here up front, and then there is another one further back. The middle segment will then be 3.8 meters. It will be kind of heavy, but anyway fit into a truck. Now, when you later cut the rails in the divisions, there will be a gap. And if you don't want that gap, you can add a washer which has the same thickness as the saw blade or grinder you intend to use. And then you build the entire track work with all the sub-roadbeds and everything up to the top, cut it apart, and then remove the washers, and the gaps will be gone. Now, this will only work if all the tracks terminate 90 degrees to the divisions. If they terminate in an angle, this will misalign the tracks, and then it's a bad idea. As you can see here, I moved the benchwork in one end and it does not flex anywhere. It's really, really stiff. So very good construction. Also this construction with legs, only 3 bolts, no support brackets or anything, did the trick. Really stable construction as well. And I can really recommend this arrangement of storage underneath on wheels. It was a really great thing. I've had great use for it already, being able to easily move things around and access all of the tools and materials I need. Then we're ready to get started on the sub-roadbed construction. For this I'm using a 12mm plywood. This in the first layer here, since I have a complete framework underneath, is pine, and that's because it's half price compared to spruce, but all of the other sub-roadbed will be spruce. I've then also printed the track plan from AnyRail. It allows you to print it in full scale and with these guide corners here, so you get almost perfect alignment in between the printed sheets. This was great. I was kind of hesitant printing over 100 pages, but it turned out to be a really good method. One of the big advantages was that it was easy to move things around slightly. If you didn't start out exactly right, you could just pull the entire track plan back and forth on the plywood. So here it is now, everything's taped together and laid out on the plywood. So next thing I do after this is to measure 2 inches or 50mm outside the tracks, and then I cut away the excessive paper there, and then the remaining paper represents the sub-roadbed, or actually where I will have plywood underneath. So that was my first step. With that done, I was ready to draw a line, an outside line, which I could use to saw. So then I just cut the sub-roadbed to shape, and then I mark the edge of it on the benchwork, and then I apply glue everywhere. Now be careful not to add too much glue along the division line here, because then you will have problems on dividing the layout later. So carefully align everything here so I get a perfect alignment, so everything turns out the way I planned, and then I screw it in place. Make sure now that all the screw heads gets properly screwed into the material so they don't stick up, because that will create irregularities then when we add the roadbed on top later. A good rule of thumb is to add an extra cross member, say 1.5 decimeter after that grade has started, well, a slope. You see here is the edge of the division, and then I have my cross member. This will ensure a good transition into the grade, rather than this a sharp start of incline due to that the plywood is divided there. Then I make a note of the height for each cross member in the benchwork to make risers. The risers are also made from plywood, 12 or 16 millimeter. I mark the height and I pre-assemble the screws on the back side, which simplifies assembly when sitting there under the layout on the floor. I found that it's hard to exactly plan the shape and position of the risers, so this is something I do on the go, so to say, while I'm assembling risers. So in many cases they need to be specially cut, or you need to add new cross members to the benchwork to get a good and stable continuity of the incline. So here I had to cut away a bit to get it centered under the sub-roadbed, and then I screw it first into the benchwork underneath, and then I assemble the sub-roadbed to the risers from top using 2 screws like this. Next is to mark the center position of the tracks, and I do that by pushing extra hard with a ballpoint pen through the paper, and then it leaves a mark in the wood. Wherever a curve is going over into a straight section, I mark this with a T, like this. So then I know the exact position of that joint. That makes it easier to place the tracks later on. I use this type of sub-roadbed. I like it. I've used it on previous layout. The disadvantage with it is that it's very soft, so not as stable as cork. Dimension vary a bit. It says 5 millimeter thickness here, but the actual dimensions vary a bit. I would say from 4.4 up to 5.1. So for the division where I've split my layout into parts, I glue these wooden blocks. And I cut these blocks into, well, say a range of thicknesses. Here you see from 5.1, 4.9, 4.6, 4.4, and that is to compensate both for irregularities in my almost perfect benchwork, but also for different height on the roadbed from Woodland Scenic. And then I just glue these in place. Later I would screw track through these using track screws or pins, and then it's necessary to pre-drill, otherwise they will crack. I use PVA glue to glue this vinyl roadbed in place. Here you see some different brands. However, if you're using cork or other a bit harder material for roadbed, then I would instead recommend using a flexible construction glue instead. It will not transfer as much noise to the framework as the PVA glue. But for this one, it's okay with PVA. And then I'm continuing like this until all of the roadbed is in place. And for this first 0mm level, I have now completed, and it looks like this. And now tomorrow, a couple of friends coming over to lay down the first tracks on my new layout. I think this is a very nice thing to celebrate, as well as later on when the first trains are running across the finished track work.
All right, so just a few adjustments in the track work and setting the borders for each layout part, and then you're ready to go. Just add the guide pins, bolt it all together, and then of course later on in the series here we will work on the electrical system as well, so it's easy to disconnect the different parts from each other, as well as the tracks, of course. We touched a bit on that, but it's coming up more in later episodes. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you have takeaways, if you learned something useful from it, please support the channel. If this was a channel about makeup or cooking, I wouldn't be needing any support at all because that's a big, broad type media. But for model railroading, it's a niche thing. So please support the channel. Get over to Patreon, set up a support account there for $1 to $20 per month. Or make a one-off donation using the PayPal dialog found in the video description below. And if you're not yet a subscriber, subscribe to this channel here on YouTube, enable that little bell, and you will get a notification once next video gets published. Until that happens, see ya.